Well, Chiefs Kingdom, the Kansas City Chiefs had that game in the palm of their hand for a little bit, but let it slip through their fingers. They have ended their season. We're going to talk about the outcome of this game, what it means, how we got here, how surprised you are, and what this means for the organization going forward. Welcome to the Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. We have Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com. Thanks for making us your first listen. I know it's a tough first listen today. There'll be other shows. I know you're ready for the draft. You can listen to that show tomorrow because I'm going to Mobile. You can see me down at the Senior Bowl. Matt, thank you for joining us. I know not the best of atmospheres tonight. Did this overall surprise you?
Certainly the way that it unfolded. I mean, I think that very few were taking the Bengals to win this game. I mean, the Chiefs were the overwhelming favorite to pull this off, and certainly up 21-3. You had to feel pretty good, especially there late in the first half with an opportunity to make it an even bigger halftime lead. But I very rarely have ever seen a team fall apart as much as the Chiefs fell apart in the second half of this one. And totally perplexing because offensively, Mahomes and the Chiefs could do absolutely everything that they wanted in the first half. Throwing the ball, running the ball. I mean, it did not matter. I mean, they were just dictating terms and up and down the field on every single drive. And I don't know if something happened late in the first half to Mahomes, but coming out of after halftime did not seem the same quarterback anymore. And certainly not the same offense. And it just absolutely fell apart. And this is a team that we're just not used to seeing that. I mean, they're the ones that are making the 18-point comebacks, not the one that are giving them away.
Mahomes had a lot of missed opportunities in this game. And for the first time in his career, I think that I can say that he shoulders a lot of this loss. I didn't expect to be able to say that after this game with the way this game started and the way things happened. But he had three specific plays that just absolutely killed Kansas City. It was the play right before half. Can't throw that ball to Tyreek Hill. Have to throw it either down at the ground, out of bounds, or a quick hit over the middle. Just absolutely can't be in that situation. And then you look at, the two turnovers. Can't turn the ball over in the playoffs. It gets magnified. Kansas City got lucky on the first turnover. It didn't kill them. But that decision to throw the deep ball to Tyreek Hill is extremely questionable at best. And I didn't understand that play call.
The big thing for me on that, Matt, is it wasn't needed. You didn't need to go downtown. You just needed to move the sticks and get a fresh set of downs. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And and after the game on that throw to Hill in overtime, Mahomes felt like, hey, that's a throw that he feels like 8 out of 10 times that Hill comes down with. And I'm with you. I'm not even sure if 8 out of 10 times is enough to say that, because that's assuming that I think he's just incompletion and you're not even calculating in the chance of an interception there. And honestly, I mean, this year it hasn't been going that way for the Chiefs on that kind of ball. So I think he probably overestimated his chances of completing that pass. You're right. I mean, in that situation, you've got a chance that even if you don't complete that, you don't pick up the first down there, you at least got a chance to send Tommy Townsend out there to pin the Bengals in a little bit more difficult position. Instead, you give them the ball near midfield, and now they're literally just 15 yards away, basically, from field goal range from Evan McPherson. And they got in their range pretty quickly, and after that, there was just nothing much more the Chiefs could do. And at the end of the first half, it was another mistake. I mean, and Mahomes, admitted as much after the game to us, saying that it was the play called for a quick throw over the middle, and if it wasn't there, throw it away. You have 1 second left to kick a field goal, and instead he got greedy, tries to get the ball out to Hill on the flat, and Hill on that play was essentially a decoy. And maybe that's another conversation as it is about whether Tyreek Hill should be a decoy on that play. But it was a poor decision, and it cost them points there. Didn't necessarily cost them points in overtime. They were probably giving it possession there anyway. But it's just a matter of, what kind of, field shape do you give the Bengals in? Do you give them the football and momentum at midfield, or are you trying to pin them back? And that was at least, I think, 30 yards of possession right there on that interception.
Yeah, and you look at that play, and I want to say this because we have said so much about Chiefs players dropping the ball. Their safety, Jesse Bates, I believe, was the one that was over the top of Hill on that play, and he got his hand in there. He made a fantastic play on the ball. That was a pass breakup. That wasn't a drop by Hill. So I do want to get that out there because we talk about drops a lot and not really great defensive plays. But that specific play, Jesse Bates made a great play on the ball. And the thing that really stuck out to me on that play was he had taken everything that he had been given early in the game. And to take a shot into double coverage at that point in the game just seemed greedy and out of step for what he had been doing most of the rest of, the second half of the season in this game in particular.
Well, to me, it was in great contrast to the first half when, remember, the big ball to Hardman
Absolutely.
down the left sideline. That was an absolutely perfect decision and read and throw. Because on that play, the Bengals, rolled their safety down into coverage. So there was literally one single high safety at the snap. And Mahomes read that immediately, knew that he had Hardman in single coverage, drops the ball on him. And which shows that when you get the favorable coverage and the look that you want, that deep ball is still there for the Chiefs. But you can't force it. And Mahomes flipped into a mode. We've seen it before. I mean, the numbers are there that when Mahomes starts scrambling a lot behind the line of scrimmage, yeah, some good things can happen, like they did in the first half. That touchdown to Kelsey was almost 8 seconds of running around. That's good scrambling from Mahomes, but he did a lot of bad scrambling in the second half. That was just wasn't running with a purpose. The Bengals, he did feel like they were spying him a bit more in the second half, which was why he wasn't taking off and trying to pick up yards as much, and he was trying to stay behind the line of scrimmage. That just resulted in some negative plays. Certainly in those 2 drives that they had, where I think they had minus 10 yards altogether on a couple of drives that are back to back in the second half. And that wasn't the running game. That was Mahomes running backwards.
At the end of the day, I think we have to talk about how this was allowed to happen. I think that is a key to this game. They're not pretty answers, but there's a couple of things that stand out to me, and we'll get your opinion as well, Matt.
It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good you'll want to eat it, unlike other protein bars which can be chalky or waxy. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. There are so many flavors that you can choose from when it comes to Built Bar: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many, many more. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Now, I'm glad you brought that up right before we went to break, Ryan, about all the different things that led to this, because I really felt like, specifically in overtime, absolutely, but play calling was questionable at best at times as well. In overtime specifically, 2 passes to Demarcus Robinson and he hadn't touched the ball all game. Just questionable calls, and Andy Reid needs to take some of the blame as well. Matt, I know he did so during the press conference.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what Andy Reid's going to do. I mean, he's certainly going to fall on the football, and even a couple of the things that that he took the blame for, Mahomes took the blame for as well. So I don't think there was any doubt that, hey, there were mistakes made all across the board, and the Bengals did do good things. I mean, I thought that in the second half that they were bracketing Travis Kelce a lot more. That certainly took him a little bit out of the game plan. And honestly, I think the Chiefs were facing just a lot more in the second half of what teams normally have done against them, and the Bengals were just doing it a little bit more effectively. And I think kind of streamlining their defense a little bit, and not trying to outthink the Chiefs too much, and just do the bread and butter about what works against Kansas City. And it was pretty effective. But once again, I mean, the Chiefs have beaten that, but I do feel like, especially as the second half went on and the offense was struggling a little bit, that Mahomes got away from, taking what was there and was absolutely trying to push the football a little bit more. And we've seen it, when teams get into those coverages and those looks, it's not there. And you're going to end up with these 3 and outs, and you're going to end up with eating the ball for a sack, because coverage. And you know what? The Bengals were not throwing blitzes or anything like that at Mahomes in the second half. They were just getting there with 4 because they were dropping 7 in coverage and doing an effective job of it.
And that brings me.
There were times they only took 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my other point that we need to talk about is Kansas City absolutely needs another weapon in this offense. I like what we've seen from Byron Pringle at times. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill are obviously great players, but there was nobody else that stepped up in this game, and that is what really killed Kansas City late in the game. Don't get me wrong, play calling was hard to watch at times, but not having another offensive weapon and a guy that can take coverages away from other players really hurt down the stretch.
See, I got to disagree. I'm with McCole on this one. He had opportunities that were missed. He should have been calling for the ball. I'm on his side on this because he was trying to be exactly what you just stated. And I have a bigger problem, and I'll never know this answer, Matt. You probably have a better idea than I do. Overtime, didn't run the ball once. Down the stretch, trying to close out the game, only ran it in order to run clock. Didn't run for effect. And I think, honestly, that was probably more of the play call. It could have been RPOs that Patrick chose to throw the ball more. I'll never know that. But at the end of the day, I think allowing yourself to not control your own emotions and your own instincts to do what's right for the situational football, I think that's what this boiled down to, much like it did earlier in the season.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, and I'm looking through here a little bit. I mean, where were Mahomes' targets, late in the game? I mean, honestly, they were getting pretty predictable there for a while. I mean, he had 4 straight targets to Kelce and actually, hit on 3 of those. Actually, no, hit on all 4 of those. Had 2 to Robinson, which I'm with you, Chris. I mean, that's probably at that point, it's an indication that, frankly, that the Bengals were doing a better job of trying to take out Kelce, and they were trying to take out Hill. And if that's the case, the other guys do have to step up. And I'm not, sold that they made their case and did that and made the case for the future to say, you know what, you deserve more opportunities. Hardman has been great in moments and everything, but, have we seen him step up when the bright lights are shining brightly? Today was a great opportunity, and, he didn't do it.
He disappears at times, and I think that's really the frustrating thing with him. I think he has the ability, but he just disappears in games at times, and I think that's really the bigger problem for this offense. And really, if they can find a number 3 type weapon to go with this offense, I think that they're going to be in a much better position. The other thing that I really questioned when it came to play calling was you left Trey Hendrickson out there on an island with Orlando Brown way too long. Give him 1 sack, okay. Give Brown some kind of help, and the Chiefs never really seemed to do that. I thought that at least chipping would be very helpful later in the game.
Yeah, and conversely, look on the other side, and I think the Bengals did at least a halfway decent job of that, of giving their offensive line some help, because the Chiefs did get plenty of pressure, but they were not getting clean shots on Burrow, and I don't think it was just merely a matter of him being, terribly elusive or slippery. I mean, Joe Burrow is not Josh Allen. He's not got the size. He doesn't have the athleticism. But it was just a matter of, on many occasions, the Chiefs getting one guy with a shot on him, not getting him down and not getting any help. I mean, other than, I think, Melvin Ingram having one really clean shot on Burrow, other than that, the Chiefs just didn't have that many. They had a lot of pressure, but they just didn't get clean tackles on him. And they certainly didn't get any gang tackles. There wasn't any of the opportunities where you saw 2 guys taking a shot. And there was especially a snap there in the second half. It was one of the ones where it was the first one that Burrow scrambled for a first down on third down when he just escaped Chris Jones. And to me, I think it was almost at that point that you could see some deflation, on the Chiefs defense, because Chris Jones just laid down on the ground, looking exasperated at the end of that play. And he and Frank Clark both came into the sideline because they were gassed after that. And I think that was indicative of the Chiefs' defense in the second half. They spent way too much time on the field. They were chasing Burrow way too much. They weren't getting clean hits and tackles on him. And as a result, I don't think they had anything left in the tank at the end.
Yeah, and Jones had 2 shots on him and missed on both on that specific play. He had him where I thought he had him dead to rights. I thought it was going to be a clean shot, but Burrow shook out of it, and then Jones was trying to run him down towards the sideline, and Burrow escaped in that play. You're absolutely right. I think that goes back to when you start talking about the defense being on the field too much, that goes back to the offense not functioning as a unit, because if Kansas City goes out there and at least picks up 3 or 4 first downs, when they had third downs in the third quarter, I think that's a different ballgame, because your defense was just on the field for, it seemed like, for eternity, and you can't have that.
And the time of possession wasn't, massively that different during regulation. It was pretty close, and in time of possession doesn't necessarily matter until it does, as I like to say. But the second half was a tale of two halves. I mean, the second half, the Chiefs defense was just on the field too much. It did catch up with them at the end. Whether that was the answer through the entire game about some of their problems with Burrow. I mean, once again, he's just not that elusive. The Titans proved that he's not that elusive. Chiefs had way too many chances. They probably had at least a half dozen almost sacks. And you just can't let a guy like that have that many chances. I mean, one was one too many.
I think that was a symptom of what we saw happen. We have to talk about the why this game went this way and what it means for the future as they get ready to try to make another run. It's been a long couple of years in terms of the number of games that they've played. We're going to get to that here in a minute. But first, I want to make sure that you Chiefs fans know all about the Get Upside app because it's a way to save money on every gallon of gas that you purchase. All you got to do is go find the Get Upside app in a Google Store or App Store and download that and use our code TOUCHDOWN. You start tracking what you do, and then you're able to accumulate some buyback, some cents and dollars off of gasoline purchases. It's easy to pay yourself back. All you have to do is go to your bank account that you connect, or PayPal, or a gift card, or whatever you would like, even Amazon. Download the Get Upside app. It's free, super easy to do, and use that code TOUCHDOWN to start saving money on the gas that you have to go buy anyway. Again, that's TOUCHDOWN, any of the app stores with the Get Upside app. We talked about what happened. I want to take a step back, something we usually don't do into the offseason, but this was very apparent to me in the why this happened. And I just come back to the sneaking suspicion that I've had the last, half of the season, is that this is a team that has been challenged by the volume of plays and games that they've had the last couple of seasons, and just felt like they were pacing themselves for 4 more quarters in a Super Bowl. And when they got up 21-3, mentally, it just clicked. We've got this. I think, that's a problem, Matt. Do you think that is what happened, or am I missing something?
I don't know, because when you ask the question about how this happened, why this happened, I immediately go to, I think, more the decision making rather than I think necessarily the execution. The execution is probably part of it. The player's mind frame certainly probably part of it. Maybe the killer instinct was missing a little bit. But then again, I look at the second half and the first half, and what differences do I see? Offensively, the Chiefs set the tone. They did what they wanted to do. They ran the football effectively. They did a lot of different things. And in the second half, I felt like they abandoned a lot of those principles. It was almost as though offensively they just felt like one big touchdown strike and it was over. They were going for the knockout punch. They were going for the haymaker. Well, nobody throws a haymaker. Yes, sometimes you can get the Mike Tyson punch and knock somebody down in 13 seconds. But more often than not, you got to win the fight all the way. And the Chiefs offensively looked like they were just going for the knockout punch, and they missed. And then defensively, I thought they did exactly what they were supposed to do in the first half. They covered, they rushed 4, and didn't blitz that often. And then in the second half, you saw, Spags start to go back to what he likes to do rather than maybe what they should have done, which was bringing 5 and bringing 6. And all of a sudden, Jamar Chase is in single coverage again. And Burrow is just taking some shots and get rid of the ball quickly to a couple of those guys. And even though they weren't hitting the chalked up deep balls like they did in Cincinnati. So that wasn't there for them. But in the second half, I thought that the Chiefs defense looked way too much like it did in week 17. They were just getting back to the same old thing of let's try and get that one week where, the Chiefs were thinking that they weren't getting the pressure on Burrow that they wanted. They weren't getting the sacks. How do you do that? You bring more pressure. Well, Burrow has shown that's the last thing you do against him. It's just like Mahomes. You don't bring more pressure. You get there with what you can, and you drop as many bad guys back in coverage. That's exactly what the Bengals did in the second half. The Chiefs didn't do that to Burrow, and he beat them. That's why I come back to, why are we out here talking about this? I think it comes down to decision making and some of the game planning in the second half just not being right. And might still be in this situation based on the execution, but I'm just not even sure that the players were given the right position to be in, as Andy Reid likes to say.
I want to clarify one thing. You said it best. I wasn't even talking about the execution. I was talking about the plan. I was talking about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in particular lighting up and thinking that they had it in the bag.
Well, and I think
at that point, well,
I think the other thing that we saw that showed up in the second half was you have some of your superstars that start dropping balls. I'm not saying that defenders didn't have good plays on them, but Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce having back-to-back balls hit them in the hands and not coming down with a catch just absolutely killed Kansas City's offense. Byron Pringle had a chance going across the field, and he couldn't get there, only got one hand on it. That kills the offense. Not being able to sustain any drives in the second half after doing what they did in the first just made absolutely no sense to me at all whatsoever. They got away from running the ball. I thought they ran the ball well, or at least early in the first half. And, I'm not a guy that likes to see them run a lot, but I think that they sprinkled it in well, and I thought it put them in very manageable second and third down situations, which helped them, throughout the first half. So I didn't understand why they went away from it.
Well, and another thing that really just perplexes me is, and I thought that once again that the Chiefs did a really good job of this in the first half, was that the officials had no intentions whatsoever of blowing any whistles in this game. They were going to let these teams play. And even though I think they probably, fouled up a couple of times with calling some tic-tac things, and they let a lot of egregious stuff go by the wayside, the officials, for the most part, were not calling anything. And the Chiefs took advantage of that in the first half because I think that, defensively especially, they were clinging to the Bengals receivers, and they were getting their hands on them the way that they needed to. In the second half, again, I don't think they did that as much. I mean, I think you saw them soften up a bit. And if that is a case of, once again, feeling comfort in that lead, and maybe that's why they're letting up a little bit, I don't know. But, this was going to be a game where the more physical team won. And the Chiefs were more physical in the first half, and the Bengals were more physical in the second half.
I'm glad you bring up those egregious calls, Matt, because I wanted to talk about that. It did not cost Kansas City the game in this one, but there were two calls that absolutely could have changed field position at times. And it didn't make sense for those not to be called, but with the way everything was called in this game, it made sense that they didn't make those calls. I think that they still need to make the calls. If the player's out of bounds, you can't hit him. If the guy calls for a fair catch, you can't hit him. I mean, those are two simple calls that absolutely should have been called. And, you look at later in the game, Andy Reid is saying, well, they had an illegal formation. Well, that didn't cost Kansas City the game. I understand that. But officials need to do what they're supposed to do, and they need to make the calls that they're supposed to make. And, yes, I think it helped Kansas City with getting hands on wide receivers at times. But going back to the touchdown to Jamar Chase, did anybody else know that ball was going there? Like 2 times in a row, they lined Fenton up outside with Jamar Chase one-on-one at the 5-yard line. The ball's going there. How do you not know the ball is going there?
And again, that comes back to you're choosing to go one-on-one with Jamar Chase and go after Burrow when that's just not what works. That's not what got you there in the first half.
And Burrow was staring at him.
Proved it. Yeah, absolutely. And we're not going to get to the Sorensen thing, trying to cover a squirrely slot wide receiver underneath that. Again, that whole series was miscalculation after miscalculation. Again, after you had proven yourself in the first half of your Steve Spagnuolo that when you don't do what you instinctually want to do, you're actually being successful. And that takes me to the last point for today, Matt. And folks, we will start talking draft tomorrow. Matt will be back later this week. Is this something that we have to get used to? The instincts of Mahomes to always to press for that big play rather than continually being the mature one and taking it where it's at. Andy Reid continue to be instinctual and let the quarterback do his own thing and not managing the run aspect of the game. Steve Spagnuolo not managing his instincts to send pressure. All this seems to be about self-control to me on all sides of this ball team. Do we just have to get used to that?
It is probably the double-edged sword. I mean, whether you call it lack of self-control or whether you call it aggression at times, it got you a Super Bowl. So it got you to a second Super Bowl. It's going to bite you sometimes. And maybe today that was the day that the over-aggression can come back to get you. That sometimes, and this probably sounds a little counter to everything that we're saying a little bit, because we're talking about, that maybe they should have been more aggressive as far as trying to put this game away, and maybe they were too complacent. But I think what we're trying to say here is that this team was trying to win the game in one play in the second half, especially in the third quarter. And you can't do that. I mean, you can be aggressive without being risky. And sometimes over the last 3 and 4 seasons, this team has probably taken a lot of risks, and a lot of them paid off. There's going to be days that it doesn't. So, yeah, maybe it is a trade-off. Maybe it's a trade-off for getting one ring and getting close to another one that sometimes you're going to fall up short. But I also, at the end of the day on this one, I also think that the last few years have just been very draining on this team. I mean, especially this season. Last year was especially draining with the COVID season and just the length of the last 3 years. Everything. I mean, there's been a lot just happening to this team. And I think that it's been a lot to ask them. I mean, there's a reason why most teams will never even get close to going to 3 straight Super Bowls. I mean, only 3 teams have ever done it. So there's a reason why it's hard. And to me, I see a lot of people saying that, this season's been an utter failure. From where you were at 3 and 4, this season's definitely not a failure.
Right.
And given into perspective of where this team is, it's not a failure because you know what? They're going to be back here pretty soon, probably next year. I mean, if you told me that the Arrowhead was going to be hosting its 5th straight AFC Championship game, I'd say, yeah, odds are probably yes. So, yeah, you know what? This team is probably risky at times, and that's probably some people out there are scratching their heads because they're going to say Andy Reid's not risky because Andy Reid doesn't go for it on 4th and 6. They take their chances in other ways. And like I said, a lot of times the last few years it's worked. Maybe it didn't work on Sunday, but you're right. I mean, that's probably what you live with, that you're going to swing and miss sometimes, and sometimes you're going to win a Super Bowl.
And I'm glad you said what you did about Andy Reid, because he took a chance at the end of the first half, gave Patrick a chance to make that play. It didn't end up working out. I thought that was him showing that he trusted his quarterback and actually taking a risk where a lot of coaches may not have even done that, because the conventional wisdom says it takes 6 seconds to do a play in the NFL, and they only had 5. The last thing I want to say really quick is you look at this game, and I think this is something that this team learns from, and I think specifically this is something that Mahomes learns from. You watched, and you mentioned it exactly what I was thinking, Matt. Starting 3 and 4 and getting to where they were this game, Patrick Mahomes had to completely change who he was as a quarterback. And if there's one thing that I know going into next season, he is going to be watching every single thing that he did this offseason. He's going to pick something that he wants to work on. And I have a feeling it's going to be one of those things where I have to just take what's there. I have to learn that it's okay to take what's there. Be cerebral when you have the opportunity. Be the reaper when you have the opportunity, like that play to Hardman where they went, single high. But you don't have to take those plays all the time. And I think that's going to put Kansas City in a great spot going forward.
Well, and, we talked about, and this will be my last parting thought for the kind of future and everything. And then we'll get into that later. But, last offseason, Patrick Mahomes had one piece of game film to show teams playing a too high look and how the teams were going to play against him. It was just a Super Bowl for the most part. This year, he's going to have 19 games worth of film, 20 games worth of film to go back and look at teams playing him. And I'll tell you what, I mean, based on what we've seen from Mahomes, the defenses that he's seen this year, you're not going to be able to pull the same things off against him next year. He's going to learn. I mean, that's what he has proven through his years in the league so far, is that he does learn. And given 20 games worth of film to be able to break down and look at and learn from versus 1 last year, he's going to be a lot more prepared for those looks. And if defenses don't come up with new ways this offseason to try and counter Patrick Mahomes, he's going to figure it out.
Hey, we'll light it back up, folks. There is reason to be happy about the future. I know this one is not the most comfortable, but things are still on the right path. We're going to start talking draft. Remember, we're here 5 days a week all year long, so draft talk starts probably tomorrow. And then Matt will be back on Tuesday. We will go from there. There's a lot of things that have to happen for this team in terms of the roster build out, what they're going to do. I expect some turnover on the staff as well. We will cover it all for you all season long. We thank you for being with us on this ride. I know it's a little bit shorter than you wanted, but there's a lot of good, positive takeaways. Thank you for all season, Matt. And thank you, Chris, for keeping me straight on everything that I do wrong.
Just trying to help out.
Everyone, enjoy it. It was another good season. There's going to be another one around the corner. Thank you for listening to us today. We will be back with you tomorrow.